Welcome to the Unlist. This is the counter video to my previous video, the dirty scents video. The previous one was my clean scents video, where I talked about the overall trajectory of clean fragrances or the concept of clean fragrances in general. And then I gave a list of my favorites. I'm going to do the same thing here with dirty fragrances, although I feel like dirty fragrances are a bit more subjective overall than clean fragrances, since a lot of people can agree upon what smells hygienic, what smells clean. Typically things associated with our bath products, our cleaning products, going back hundreds of years. But dirty is a bit more subjective because some people read dirty as a sexual metaphor, while others read dirty as just actually dirty, like the smell of filth, right? So there's a little more wiggle room there, I'd say. But for me, I'm going to try and be the Colossus of Rhodes here and sort of straddle both sides of this argument. I have a video on animalics I did a while back, and that more or less holds true in terms of how I feel about sexually dirty fragrances. So this is going to be a little bit more about actual dirt, but also I'm going to cover the naughty bits of dirtiness too. Just the overall, I guess you could say the overall spectrum of dirty, right? Now, what people thought was dirty a long time ago, just like with clean, no different here, can seem far-fetched compared to today's concept of what's dirty, right? So you go back a few centuries, all right, into the 18th and then 19th century, and you find that a lot of people back then, since they had more lax hygiene standards to begin with, they were more tolerant of smells that we might find to be dirty today. Not that people didn't bathe. People did bathe. That's a very big misconception a lot of modern people have, that folks hundreds of years ago didn't bathe. They did. They just didn't have as good a soap. They didn't have as many accessible smells in regards to perfumery. Colognes were just starting to be a thing in the 18th century, right? Just starting to be a thing. So for the average person a few hundred years ago, bathing was just having some kind of basin full of water and a sponge of some kind or a rag. And if they had a basic bar of tallow soap, which was usually unscented, right? That's what they had. Maybe it had a slight scent to it, whatever they could find to put in it to give it an odor. But generally speaking, the act of bathing was not necessarily conflated with the act of scenting oneself, right? So being clean was just that, having the detritus washed away, the excess oils from the skin, the dirt from roaming around outside, all that stuff. Doesn't necessarily mean that they would have a perfume smell to them after they bathed, right? They would just either reduce or remove the body odor from the act of bathing. And then, of course, there was no deodorant back then either. People didn't have deodorant products, antiperspirant products. So if you were to go back in time, a lot of people might smell like armpits. They might have a fleshier scent to them than you might find comfortable for you, right? Depending on what part of the world you live in. And that might still come across as dirty, but they are functionally clean. They just didn't have all of the shampoos and things that we have now, right? They didn't. And eau de cologne was very high in alcohol, and that was a very big step towards more regular hygiene as we see it now, since the alcohol dries the skin out, opens the pores, removes the oil, stuff like that. So, anyhow, back then, by and large, dirty smells were really about sexual smells, since, like I said, people didn't really see the smell of soil and stuff as aesthetic in any way, right? Since That was a part of everyday life. Cobblestone streets, dirt roads, things like that. People dumping chamber pots outside their window. Okay, days before we had underground sewage, so these smells were everywhere. People didn't find it aesthetically intriguing to smell like a hay bale, all right? People didn't find it aesthetically intriguing to smell like ground up stone bits. That just wasn't their thing. So by and large, the smell of dirty was more of the sexually suggestive kind. And for a lot of people in that time period, certain sweet florals, certain what we call indolic florals, or florals that have skatole in them, indole and skatole in equal measure. So that means things like ylang ylang, things like jasmine, okay guys, osmanthus to a degree, all right. Tuberose is another one. These floral notes have a fleshy, indolic, skatolic aspect to them. And then you combine that with more phenolic notes as well, certain musks, okay, patchouli with its camphoraceous nature, and you can evoke the smell of bed sheets. You can evoke the smell of a bordello, okay, of a courtesan, if you will. So very heavy jasmine perfumes, very heavy musk perfumes, especially the animalic musks like civet, castoreum, tonkin, okay. Ambergris to an extent, but not as much, because ambergris is a bit salty. It has an ocean aspect to it. But it can also come across dirty, depending on how it's refined, how it's created. Once we start moving into more modern times, though, right? And a lot of these animalic musks were either holding hands with synthetic musks, like white musks, or the animalic musks were being buried by all of these aromatic materials, right? And the aromatic materials tend to hide the dirtier aspects of those musks by using the musk as a a sort of building block, foundation. So the point isn't to smell the civet. The point isn't to smell the castoreum. The point is to have those materials project the other materials. Fragrances like that became more popular at the turn of the 20th century. And right around that time, we started to switch our perception of dirty, right, away from explicitly suggestive things to things that could smell like a garden, things that could smell like petrichor, or things that could smell like moss, right, from a tree. That's the more aesthetic aspect of dirty. And those fragrances became more and more popular into the 20th century, especially the post-war period, where green fragrances became really popular. Sterol acetate, galbanum, other green materials began entering the perfumer's lexicon more strongly. Things like Magrif, okay, Valver. Once you head into the second half of the 20th century and you have the more spiced fragrances, amber, which is always kind of waxed and waned. We had a bit of a fling with amber in the early half of the 20th century. Then amber came back around the 70s. Amber became another thing that we saw again into the 80s. More animalic versions of amber that had heavy musk components to them, labdanum, things like that. So again, there's a bit of wiggle room here for dirty, all right? So now you get an idea of what most people consider to be dirty. It can either be sexual or more platonic in nature, for lack of a better word. Now it's time for me to cover some of my favorite dirty fragrances. So one of them I have with me right now. I'm going to show you. It's from a house I have done several videos on, okay? And it is none other than the legendary Jicky by Guerlain, released in 1889. This is my scent of the day. And I'm wearing this to keep in theme with the video I'm currently in the middle of filming, right? And to me, this is one of the best dirty fragrances. Although, I'd say when this first came out, it probably wasn't considered dirty. Because again, like I said, late 19th century, people had different bathing habits. People didn't wear deodorant. All right, Lysol wasn't a thing. So this fragrance was more or less a sensual aromatic fragrance. It used musks, in this case, civet musk. It used patchouli. It used tonka. It used oak moss. All these things gave it a phenolic, sort of scatological vibe with the musk. But then the lavender, the other florals, okay, the spices, the bergamot up top, rounded everything off and gave it a nice aromatic touch that can, once it dries down, surprisingly feel, I don't want to quite say fresh, that's the wrong word, but pleasant. Even on a warm day, even on a 60 some odd degree day, not summertime granted, not the dead heat of summer, but on a nice spring day, once the musks settle in and all the other aromatics kind of settle on top, this can have a very rounded, pleasant aromatic smell. And before long, you can actually forget all about it being dirty. It's perhaps why it's one of my favorites, since it's a animalic fragrance that doesn't really try to be overtly animalic. It comes out of the gate with that strong fecal note. People comment all the time, oh, it's got a very, Jicky's very fecal. In the beginning, yes, it does. In the beginning, it has that big old dollop of doo-doo, but within literally 10 minutes or less, 10 minutes or less, guys, it takes on a whole different character. And if you want more of a deliberately musky, more strident, more, swinging dick kind of a fragrance, as they say, you don't want this. And even its men's counterpart, Mouchoir de Monsieur. Mouchoir de Monsieur is more animalic. It's more musky, more, more patchouli, more civet, more lavender. But even then, I would not really call that fragrance overly dirty either, because once again, you get past the opening moments of Mouchoir de Monsieur, and it takes on a very similar character to this, just more straightforward, because it's more about the lavender, more about the tonka. Mouchoir de Monsieur is a proper fougere. This is an abstract fragrance. Mouchoir de Monsieur was a fougerification of Jicky, if you want to. That's not really a word, but fougerification of Jicky, for lack of a better term. But it is also a dirty fragrance in some respects, and it is also one of my favorites. But I think Jicky edges it out, just because the complexity, the development, to me, is just a little better in Jicky. It's a little more, right? I feel like there's something lost with Mouchoir de Monsieur. Not that it's a lesser fragrance, but with the paring down of notes and the amplification of other notes, something has been lost with it. You may prefer it, though. If you think MDM is better than good old J, Miss J here, then that's fine. We can agree to disagree on that. But I have them both, and I enjoy them both. I'm just saying, I think Jicky's a little better. Now, some other dirty fragrances of mine that I really enjoy. Obviously, I'm going to go with the cumin type of fragrances, the really like, pound of dirt type stuff. Anything with a strong vetiver note, anything with a nice lentiscus note, a mastic note. All of these things can add a speck of dirt to the equation. So Eau d'Hermès is one that I find very nice, and it's more modern reinterpretation. Jean-Claude Elena kind of did an homage to Radnitsky's work with Eau d'Hermès when he created Declaration. So I kind of consider Eau d'Hermès and Declaration as two sides of a coin. The original one is much rounder, okay, much warmer with the spice. Declaration is kind of like the cold version of Eau d'Hermès. It has much the same cumin, the same vetiver, the same leathery base material, but the spice arrangement is a much cooler, much drier. It's not as rounded, not as sweet as Eau d'Hermès. But both of them are fantastic, dirty fragrances. You like leather, you'll like them both. Moving right along, Moustache by Rochas from 1949. Another Radnitsky fragrance, actually. Quite dirty, in my opinion. One of the pissy-wissiest of all of the fragrances. It has a very, very Uranus civet note in it. The older versions are actually a little closer to Jicky, rounder, right? The lavender is more noticeable in the older versions of Moustache. When they upgraded it to the Eau de Toilette, which later became the Eau de Toilette Concentré, that was a bit heavier on the bergamot, a bit heavier on the civet, A little more focus on the geranium there. The lavender is dialed back in that. Not as round, okay? A lot of people who say that moustache is a fougere are probably smelling the old cologne. And the people like myself that call it a sheep, we're smelling the slightly newer eau de toilette, the blue label versus the red label. Rudnitska created both versions, but he created the cologne for the more dandy, dapper type, and the toilette for the more stepping out, going to the club kind of thing. So one's daytime, one's nighttime, really, even though they're the same fragrance in different concentrations. But the daytime one feels more fougere. Some folks will classify it as fougere, whereas the eau de toilette and later the concentrate rendition, a little more nighttime, a little more grab 'em kind of a fragrance. One of my favorites. I've worn it a lot, actually. And then, of course, you've got stuff like Kouros, right? See, Kouros to me is one of those conundrums because on one hand, it's very soapy and clean, especially with the way it uses the white floral materials and the aldehydes up top. But then on the other hand, it's also very dirty because it's got a big old Cinnarome Animalis note plonked right down on top of some benzoin, right, on top of some oak moss. So it's got that honeyed PP characteristic in the base, but then it's also got the clean, fougere-like soapy notes up top too. So it's basically like someone were to take a bottle of Paco Rabanne, Pour Homme, to a gay bathhouse, right? And you're in the shower room and you drop the soap, and I'll let your imagination fill in the details. I won't go any further there, but it is literally like bathhouse in a bottle. So I don't quite know where I want to stand with that, whether it's dirty or clean or perhaps just the perfect combination of both. And then there are some 70s fragrances that go in a non-sexual dirty context. They go, once again, for the petrichor, for the mossy, for the compost leaves, for the actual, actual salt of the earth dirtiness, right? And Yatagan is one that I make mention of quite often. If you want to smell like you're walking in the woods, but more specifically like the Didaceous woods of the East Coast, not all the pine trees, you're up in the West Coast, you're up in Oregon, you're up in Washington, you want more of an Aqua de Selva, a pine fragrance. If you're going to be up here where we live, you want more of a pine fragrance. You want to smell like you're in a maple forest, like you're in an old oak growth forest, all right? Old chestnut forest, something you'd see in Pennsylvania. Appalachia is another good place, Maryland, Virginia, right? Then you want to smell Yatagan. Yatagan, to me, has that smell of fallen leaves, big piles of fallen leaves, okay, bare trees, leaves turning colors, the smell of bark, the smell of all that stuff in fall. And that's definitely dirty, right? Different kind of dirty, but definitely dirty. And you can lump right alongside Yatagan, you can lump in Friendliest by Nina Ricci because it's the same perfumer and it's actually the same composition, really. I think it's a mod. I think Friendliest is a mod of Yatagan. I think because the same perfumer did both, that he took a mod from one and tinkered with it and turned it into another fragrance. It's been done plenty of times, guys, more often than you think. I mean, Aramis came out of Cabochard, for example, so it's not a far stretch to think that one fragrance could be a modification of another. Perfumers like to revisit their work, and when they can get away with it, especially when a particular composition like that is in demand, when a certain style is in demand, it's easy to take your work on that style and pop out another take, and pop out another take. Green Irish Tweed to Cool Water, another good example of that, right? So Friendliest to me is just sort of like another take of Yatagan. Rounder, smoother, albeit, okay, a little rounder, a little smoother, but in the same wheelhouse. Probably the same family tree, like I was saying. Also, certain vetiver fragrances can read pretty dirty. Like Guerlain vetiver, honestly, it reads pretty dirty. Not so much Givenchy. Givenchy's is very sharp, dry, very woody, but the Guerlain feels like it has a speck of dirt in it. So that one's going to also qualify one of my favorite dirty fragrances. Halston Z14 can also be a bit dirty because of the way it handles the woody, ambery aspect of the base, and the cinnamon can feel a bit dirty. And then, you move along into the 80s, stuff like Witness by Jacques Bogart can also feel a bit dirty. Again, it's kind of got the woody forest thing, but it adds some cinnamon in. Arte Capucci is another one that feels dirty to me. Feels like a pine forest, forest floor, Arte Capucci from '86. And then not a whole lot of stuff in the 90s, guys. Not a whole lot of dirty fragrances in the 90s. But some honorable mentions on the muskier, more animalic sexual side. Furio definitely counts as dirty. Furio is almost pornographic, guys. Furio is almost a pornographic fragrance. It really is. All right. Also, Sybaris by Antonio Puig, the lesser-known cousin to Quarum. A very sandalwoody fragrance, a lot of petitgrain in that too. Sour opening civet. Very nice. Very dirty though, but very nice. And then we wouldn't really see dirt come around in a big way until the 2000s again, right? We would come back around and we would have stuff like Terre de Hermes. We would have stuff like Rockabar a few years earlier. And then Encre Noir by Lalique. Those fragrances brought back dirty in a big way. Declaration I mentioned is from the 90s, but I consider it, like I said, two halves of the Eau de Hermes coin. So even though Declaration is technically a 90s fragrance, to me it's a fragrance out of time. It feels like it's completely out of time, so I don't tend to lump it in with the 90s, even though I probably should. However, Terre de Hermes, same perfumer, Jean-Claude Elena, probably one of my hands-down favorite dirty fragrances, and you can really smell the dirt in that one, all right? The way he handles vetiver, the way he handles a lot of the spices in that, the way he handles the cedarwood, it just smells, it just smells like you're out in a field, like a field with dry patches of brown dirt. There's grass coming up, but there's these big patches of dead grass where there's the dry dirt's caking up under your feet. And you can feel it with the way the vetiver plays with the grapefruit notes, the flinty, metallic notes that remind you of rocks, Dirty in a non-sexual way, but dirty nonetheless. And then, of course, Encre Noir, which is like vampire woods at night. We've already gone down that route. Pencil shavings mixed with vampire woods, another dirty smell. And then, Gucci Guilty, Pour Homme, Absolute, right, from 2017. Another surprisingly dirty fragrance. It smells like you're taking Fahrenheit by Dior with the gasoline note and then mixing it with a whole bunch of dirt. It's got the patchouli in there, it's got the leather in there, and it's got that gasoline ione vibe going on, but it just smells like a well-worn, unwashed saddle. Really an unwashed saddle. And honorable mentions also go to Elevated Oud by Zara, same perfumer, Alberto Morillas. Relatively same composition, but it has a small oud note dropped in there. So it's Gucci Guilty Absolute Pour Homme, plus a little bit of oud, I guess, synthetic oud. But it too has a very dirty, rubbery kind of smell to it. All right, I've named my favorite dirty fragrances. You let me know in the comment section what your favorite dirty fragrances are, whether we're talking about sexually dirty or platonically dirty. We're talking about earth, we're talking about filth. Whatever you want. If you have a fragrance that reminds you of a trash can and you enjoy wearing it, you can tell me in the comment section. I'm all about hearing it. All right, guys. This has been the Dirty Fragrances video for 2024. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Catch you next time.